Greetings, good evening, and welcome back, everyone, to the Council of the Ones Babylon 5 review. It is, to quote the great Tony Stark, it is good to be back and good to have you all with us this evening. I know this is later than we go live, but the circumstances have changed. Got a brand new job, working different hours, so me and the council, we confabbed and we're like, okay, we want to stick with the same day. And we're like, yeah, we'll stick with the same day. Okay, well, can we do a later time? Yes, we'll do a later time. So here we are. And it is, I want to say to everyone in the chat or everybody that's going to be coming in the chat or anyone that catches this on the replay, I have missed you all very much. And I want to say thank you for all of your support and for all your messages during the last several weeks in terms of dealing with Mother Ambassador's health and getting her through her heart surgery, her heart bypass surgery, and everything else. It is greatly appreciated, more than you realize, and it is great to be back. And of course, I've got with me this evening, I've got my two fellow council members, my two good friends, Fiona Wolf and Mountains of Elysium. We are awaiting the arrival of Lord Kojay and potentially Zodrider. So, Fiona, Elysium, guys, I've missed you. And it's, like I said, it is really good to be back. And we're coming back kind of on a high note because this is a really pivotal episode. There's a lot that goes on in this one. Interludes and examinations. And there are many, many examinations going on in this episode, and there's a lot to unpack. But I just want to say thank you, and good to see you both live.
Yes. And one of my biggest things from Ivanova this episode, when the Vorlon goes to ground, I worry, because now the shadows are out in the open doing la-di-da-di-da. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Up to no good, them shadows.
Shadows, they're often up to no good. And that's a scary thing. But yeah, there's a lot to, like I said, there is an awful lot to unpack in here, so why don't we go ahead and get started? Like I said, if Kojay and Zodrider get in here, well, I'll let them in when they come in. They'll just have to know the secret knock. So there's no lack of stuff to discuss with this episode, so I've said my piece. Let's dig in, guys. Where do you want to begin?
Man, everybody seems to have something going on. Franklin, Wando, Sheridan, Ivanova.
Kosh.
Yeah. Mr. Morden versus Veer.
Elysium, you really had to do that.
Yes.
I mean,
yes,
granted, I did it last night. Guess who's back? And yes, that is based on "Without You" by Mr. Marshall Mathers, Eminem. Yes, I did base it on that. And to the chat, Bureau 31, hello, good evening. And I know it's very late for your app, so Bureau, thank you very much for staying up into the wee hours. And we'll make sure it's worth your time, absolutely. But yeah, I'll just, you know what? I oftentimes say where you want to start. This time I'll say let's kick it off. Let's dig into the whole situation with Mr. Morden, Mr. Lando, and Veer, of course. So let's dig into that whole situation there, and let's dissect. Let us begin. Here we go.
Lando's one true waifu is coming back to the station.
Well, his other waifu, the waifu that he trusts, this is the waifu that I'd say he adores and trusts. And of course, as the Adira from season 1. Or is it season 2? I can't remember. It's been a while.
Well,
anyway.
Yeah, it was season 1 because Dracus was the whole... Yeah, yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
And he spends a little bit more on flowers than Lieutenant Corwin.
Well, he has the means to do it. I mean, he is an ambassador. He has a rather healthy line of credit as the ambassador to the Centauri Republic, and let's be honest, the Centauri be loaded.
Well, that and his star has been rising, much to his disadvantage later on, especially when it comes to a certain
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Morden, because Mr. Morden wants him back.
Mm-hmm. Well, and to quote a favorite movie of mine, first you get the power, then you get the money, then you get the woman. And for Londo, he kind of went in that order, sort of. So, but yeah, he's. This is actually a very crucial episode for Londo in particular because, well, he gets Mr. Morden back in his pocket, or Morden gets Londo back in his pocket, one way or the other. Somebody's in somebody's pocket. Sadly, it's not. It's not. Okay, okay, this may be a little on the nose, but it certainly isn't Adira that's in Londo's pocket. Sadly.
And unfortunately, Londo finds out the hard way that is indeed her, because she came back to the station wearing that, gift he gave
Mm-hmm.
her. Wear it proudly as a free woman.
Free
Well,
woman. Yeah.
oh boy.
Okay. And a name I have not seen in a while. Of course, I haven't been live in a while either. Superhero Reviews, Cody. As always, it is good to see you, bud. And I know it's been a while since I have been live, but always great to have you in the chat. And I hope you enjoyed the discussion, man. So, anyway, yeah, it's this. Get down, get crapola, stupid thing. Okay, here we go. The unfortunate thing with Londo is this was really the point of no return for him, because after this, his fate is pretty much sealed. He can't get out. He tries, but he's in the enemy camp now, and he's going to be in until the day he gets he gets choked by Jakar.
Actually, it's almost, because the one prophetess, the former emperor's wife, was saying, "Don't kill the man who's already dead." That's Mr. Morden. That really seals Londo to the Drock later, because the Drock see him as the person that basically messed up the shadows.
Mm-hmm.
So at least that's how I see it when that lady was making the proclamations, and I'm looking back at it, it's like, yeah, that does fit. That seems to be his last way out, and he kills Mr. Morden and thus suffers the consequences of it.
I guess you could.
So I always thought that was Sheridan, because Sheridan had died twice. So I always thought the prophecy was referring to Sheridan when they were talking about that.
Well, the only reason why I think it was Morden is because in the Shadow Within book, you pretty much get death of personality when the shadows use you as a puppet. That happened to Anna Sheridan, and it also happened to the people who didn't accept the team up with the shadows on that exposition.
Yeah, the Icarus. Yeah. Well, it's the thing is about that whole prophecy that Major Barrett has later as Emperor Turhan's third wife or wife gives. It is so. It's so general that it could almost mean anything. Now, I'm not saying it couldn't necessarily it could be in reference to Morden. It could very likely be in reference to Morden. But the question becomes, is this truly the point of no return for Londo? I say it is, because after this, except for killing Lord Rifa, everything he does is just so he can get revenge. I mean, that's the big thing for him, is to get revenge on Rifa, because he believes that Rifa had Adira killed. When in fact, we know, although Londo doesn't know, but we know that Morden was the one that had Adira killed.
I think Morden ended up having those other two guys poison her, because I think the doctor's report mentioned something about poison, and Morden made sure to use a poison that Londo would assume Lord Rifa would use. Because in a previous conversation, Londo did say he poisoned Rifa, and ooh boy,
I got here first, Rifa.
Yep. And then Morden got there second.
And the guys who Morden worked with, apart from Londo, were pretty much killed off. Morden killed the first security guard, and I do believe he killed the poisoner as well.
No, actually, the poisoner walked off.
All right.
The poisoner
Yeah,
survived. If you're referring to the bald headed gentleman that he paid off, he killed the security guard, but he left the poisoner live because I get the feeling that guy was an agent for the Shadows. He just had that look of a shadow agent.
That and like the guy you see later on Zahu Doom, the guy with the kind of whiter hair. All the shadow agents like to dress in dark black clothing or brown, very muted dark colors.
Mm-hmm. Very true. Well, the other interesting little fact about this whole situation with Londo and Morden is Londo has done everything he can to cut Morden out, and yet Morden is sly enough and sneaky enough to figure out a way to use that to his advantage. He's like, if you had only not cut ties with me, I could have warned you about what Rifa was going to do. Morden always plays the angles, or he always has an angle, and I think that's something that's really interesting about his character. Is the Shadows accentuated, I think, the more devious and underhand side of Morden's nature, and it's now I'll say it's obviously also could be attributed to good writing as well.
Well, and again, with the extended book series where you see the background of all that, they ate into Morden's guilt. Like they mentally fed on his guilt, so he would accept, this is the only way through the Shadows that I'll be useful. Like the dude had a whole mountain of guilt laid at his feet. So, yep, swallowed him whole, literally.
Yeah, pretty much.
Was it just for fun? I didn't manage to hear all of it, but I was listening to the commentary on it, and it was it Jerry Doyle, Richard Biggs, Box Seitner, and Ed Wasser, and they were most of it was them laughing and poking fun at each other, and Briggs and Box Seitner said Wasser was only hired because he had a used car salesman's smile.
Yes. I have always thought that myself about Mr. Morden's character. He almost reminds you of a very sleazy, very slimy, very underhanded used car salesman. He is like the Uber car salesman. You can never turn him down because he always has an angle. So, but yeah, honestly, I think one of the really great things about this whole situation with Morden and Londo, and particularly with Veer, is again you see the advancement of Veer's backbone. I mean, you really see it on display, and Fiona put the quote up here in the chat a little while ago. Is there anything I can do for you, Mr. Veer, short of dropping dead? No, not really. Now go away. You bother me.
What's sad is if Morden hadn't seen Veer in the Zocalo shopping for Londo, Morden wouldn't have realized that Adira was on the station or coming to the station.
Exactly. I will say, though, however, I did like the little comedic moment between him and the salesman or whoever it is. And he's like, the lady's going to need certain things. And I think we can all infer what those things are. He's speaking of...
fancy laces. Fancy laces.
Okay, we're all adults here. Lingerie. And of course, he's like, do you want this with or without garters? And Veer's like, I'll leave it up to you. He's like, garters. You can never go wrong with garters. He's not wrong.
Adults in calendar years, anyway. However, I did find it interesting that Veer could stand up to the devil. But when it came to buying lingerie, he was, you started out.
Yeah. And just real quick to the chat, Impossible, Tim, good to see you, bud. And thank you for tuning in this evening. So, but yeah, it's funny. He can stand up to Morden, but he has trouble buying ladies' lingerie. It's almost like he was referring back to his days as Flounder from National Lampoon's Animal House, because Stephen Fred was one of Stephen Fre's first starring roles was as Flounder in National Lampoon's Animal House, one of my all-time favorite movies. Love that movie, love it to death, love it, love it, love it.
Well, honestly, I see Vera as more of like, when it comes to romance, he's a more kind of courtly fellow. You know, he doesn't want to get into other people's personal in terms of like relationship stuff.
Yes.
So that's why he's more skitterish around that. It's like, but I don't want to know which base it is.
Yeah, pretty much. Well, I think we've kind of gotten all we can get out of the whole situation with Londo and Veer and Mr. Morden. So why don't we transition? If y'all want to, we can discuss the whole issue of the Shadow War. We could talk about Sheridan and Kosh and Ivanova and all that, or we can whatever. So,
Well, I guess we could go into a little bit with the Shadow War, because they pretty much got all the non-aligned world people fighting each other, because the Pakiri guy is making, over, like, kind of like, please, we need extra help, and I think he's even trying to get Delenn to pop in on their side or something, and because now that they can't call upon Earth Alliance, because Earth Alliance is kind of standing alone off to the side, because the Shadows want to use them for stuff too. But unlike before, the Shadows are out in the open now. They're not hiding anymore.
Nope, they are busting heads, and they are busting heads very well, because, well, unless you have a White Star Craft or a telepath, you're screwed.
And even then, you'll need more than just one telepath. I think, depending on the strength of the telepath, sometimes you might need a handful of them just to stop one of their capital ships. Exactly. Not everybody has a leader-level telepath with them.
No, they do not. You were going to say something, Elysium?
No, I was just mentioning that the Brakiri ambassador was refreshingly honest. He said, yeah, we attacked our neighbors because we thought the Shadows had our back. We thought they liked us. My bad. Could you please help us? We were wrong.
We were stupid.
And how many races, how many in this setting, in this universe, have actually done that or admitted it? The Brakiri, I think, are
not many.
Almost unique.
Yeah. Yeah, we were stupid. We thought the Shadows would help us, and then of course you bring in the one ambassador in the metallic suit. I can't remember what the name of the race is.
Gaiam.
Yeah. And the game are like, no, we're just gonna be quiet. We're not gonna do anything, because if we're quiet, they just may leave us alone. And they're like, they're not gonna leave you alone. They're eventually gonna come for you, because unless you can cloak your planet, or you live underground and they can't scan you, which, let's be honest, it's the Shadows. They'll be able to scan you.
Well, that and the Shadows have underground complexes, so it's not like you could hide under the earth of your own planet anyway. But I'm thinking, like, there was only a handful of them, because they didn't really go into detail how many races were in the League of Non-Aligned Worlds, but all the noteworthy ones were fighting each other.
Well, let's say you've got the Brakiri, the Gaiam, the Drazi, the Pak'mara. Oh, lordy. There's a few others, but I can't remember the name of the species off the top of my head.
Yeah, like the one that was introducing herself to Sinclair way back when, that had the fin on the head.
That's the Hayek, I think.
Yeah, the Hayek.
The Latiri, but the thing is, I don't even think they got messed up in that whole war, just because they were already kind of isolationist anyway. So the Shadows probably would pick off people that were more likely to interact sooner, and then go after the stragglers later.
Exactly. So, but the really interesting thing here is you've got a dynamic where Sheridan is having to go up against someone that he respects, and that's never easy. He's trying to do what's best for the League, to try and get the League on board. So the only person he has to turn to is, of course, Kosh. And it's not easy to go up against a mentor, because let's be honest here, the relationship between Sheridan and Kosh was mentor and mentee. I think that's the right terminology. And that whole scene, that whole exchange is so intense. And Sheridan's like, look, we know you can't take the shadows on by yourself, but we need your help. You're the only ones that can do this. And Kosh is doing everything he can to try and say, look, we're not ready, or as he says later on, I'm scared. The one thing you would never expect a being as old and as powerful as Kosh Nenarek to say is, I am scared.
Well, he
And
even
that
admitted it, because he was saying, as David Sheridan, in projecting into John's mind, like
exactly.
you eventually get used to being where you're at. You get very comfortable.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we never consider the fact that even as a first one, the Vorlons have feelings. They have emotions. They emote just like we do. They feel we can guess that they feel joy to some degree or another. They feel fear. They feel anger. They feel anxiety. It's like Ivanova said, when the Vorlon goes to ground, I worry. And I think this episode is really telling of just the mindset of a being like a first one, like a Vorlon. And how, regardless of how advanced or how old you are, or how powerful you are still, just to one degree or another, a slave to your emotions. And that whole exchange between Kosh and Sheridan. And Sheridan goes, don't you dare turn your back on me. Don't you even think about walking away. And you see Kosh turn around, and the orifice, or the aperture on his eyepiece narrows.
Yeah, I think he even says impudent or something like that.
Yes, impudent. And then you see that happen, and they cut to the CNC, and somebody says, "We've got a
energy spike.
We've got an energy spike, and it's unlocalized." And you realize, oh shit, Kosh is really pissed. And Sheridan just keeps pushing him. He's not about to back down. And this, for me, I think, is one of the great, really one of the best written, best performed scenes in the whole series, is that exchange between Kosh and Sheridan. I mean, to me, it's a masterclass. It really is.
I think I know why Kosh was also didn't want to come out in the open like what the Shadows were doing, is because these two races had this kind of clandestine, ideological, I guess you want to say, handshake, where the Shadows ideology promoted them going out in the open and being, directly confrontational. While on the flip side, if the Vorlons did the same thing, well, if the gloves are all off on both sides, you're pretty much like, everybody's going to be pulled into a big all-out war.
Yeah, pretty much. But I think this is one time that I think maybe deep down Kosh knew that maybe it was time that the gloves came off for the Vorlons, but the only thing I don't think he expected was them to implement the Scorched Earth, bringing in the Planet Killers, because you've got to wager that Kosh knew about the Planet Killers. He had to. I
think their leadership, the Vorlon leadership, used Kosh's death as the gloves are going to come off, and we're not going to care which kind of eggs we crush underneath. Have fun, y'all. It's like, oh god. Because you would think that for them, they would be more, I guess, not merciful, but more maybe forward-thinking in the fact that we might need people later. No, they went like Scorched Earth in their own way.
And I've got to switch over to Twitch for just a minute.
It's like, woof.
I always felt that the Vorlons and Shadows, what reminds me is that show, was it Altered Carbon, Whereas people who lived a really long time felt that their lives were just worth more than anyone else's, and it started to lose connect with the rest of humanity. And I think the Vorlons and Shadows have become the same. They've just lost touch with the rest, and they believe their lives matter more. So one Vorlon life is worth more than a million or a billion younger race.
Yep. Which is why, Lorian had to point out, oh, look, they're giving you the choice what you want to choose. And that he kind of framed it that way so that Sheridan and Delenn would pick up on the fact that you don't have just these two choices between Vorlon and Shadow. Yeah. So I like that about this series. It just keeps building up on itself.
Yeah, kind of. Vorlon and Shadows, the choice between the frying pan and the fire.
Yep. Which way do you want to die, little froggies? Slow death through boiling, or instant laser face death through the shadows? Like, oh boy. Because they forgot their role to actually shepherd races, and that's a big no. I could see why Lorian was disappointed in them.
Yeah, because, Kosh even says, he repeats it, if you go to Zahadum, you will die.
And Sheridan even said, you've said that before, and he said, yes, now you really will die.
Yeah. Because, imagine, if you will, Kosh and Sheridan actually going to Zahadum. Them going on a White Star or something to that effect. Kosh can throw down. We know this. We see it. Him against a bunch of shadows, and then Sheridan. Yeah, they're going to throw down. They may die, but they're going to throw down, and they're going to take a hell of a lot with them, because, as Lorian says to Sheridan in season 4, you have not seen a Vorlon enraged. Well, he kind of has a little, because if you notice what Kosh does to him, he's pissed. Kosh is not happy. Mm-hmm. Kosh turns into, Darth Kosh for just a minute. Because he's got him in a very Vader-esque force choke. And that, for me, says, Vorlons are not to be effed with. Of course, I knew that in the first place. But we get a taste of what's to come in terms of when Yilkash comes on the station to replace Kosh. And
then poor Lita. Poor Lita. Oh my God, poor Lita.
Yeah, Lita, she gets the raw end of the stick. Or the raw end of the deal, totally. But, honestly, I think... Okay, yep, you're done.
Oh man. Yeah, I'm trying to remember. Is that conversation in this episode where Sheridan says "up yours"?
Oh shoot! I've timed that person out.
Oh,
Artificer Johnny, I am sorry. I thought you were a troll.
I see it in the other side of our thing. Some sort of want to become famous, buy followers, and something or other Twitch.
Yeah. Artificer Johnny, I am very, very sorry. If you're still in the chat, my apologies. Yes, I'll bring up his comment. Up yours. Yes, Sheridan does say to him, up yours. Yeah, Artificer, I think you've been in my chat before. It's just been a while since I've seen you, and I had a troll in my Twitch stream, so I am sorry. Yes, Sheridan does say, up yours. So, oh, crap. Blasted trolls.
But the way all these different factions react, though, is leads into the humans and other people that take up the mantle of being the elder race later on with the the deconstruction of fallen stars and stuff.
Yeah,
they end up giving more choices on the table because they remembered what happened to them then, through Sheridan and everybody else. It's like, okay, we're going to have more questions for people to answer. That's why they added those other 2 questions, I think, not just the Shadow and Vorlon question, but the additional questions that Sheridan and everybody else was asking, and even what Lorien was asking. So there was some good that came out of it.
Yeah. And Bureau 31, yeah. I hear you have a saying. I understand it's a 3-edged sword. Well, we have a saying too. Put your money where your mouth is. Yeah, let's just be honest here. Sheridan is not being necessarily Mr. Diplomat in this particular moment. He's like, I am not leaving here till you agree. We need you to do this. You're the only ones that can do this. So help us the hell out. Get off your carrot-suited butts and help us. You've got the firepower. You've got the means. We know you can't do it all on your own, but at least give us a freaking hand. And that's the one thing, like I said, that's the one thing about this particular section of this episode that I absolutely love, is because it shows you that Sheridan really is the one that's going to change the dynamic of the universe, the B5 universe in particular. He's going to be the one that breaks the cycle in season 4 later on.
Yeah.
Yep. Because just like Galen says in part of the Lost Tales stuff, or even what was it? It was the intro before Crusade happened, the actual movie. Whenever people, whenever something happens, Sheridan will sit up and take notice. It doesn't take much to convince him, and then others follow his lead.
Mm-hmm. Well, because Sheridan, I'm gonna say this. Sheridan, honestly, I think he went places and he did things I don't think Sinclair necessarily would have done, because Sinclair and Sheridan had 2 completely different mentalities, and we will see those different mentalities in next week's episode, and that of course is War Without End. And just to let you all know, we will be doing a full breakdown of both parts 1 and 2. We're going to treat this as just one very long episode, so just heads up for that. But yeah.
Sorry, I was thinking next week is the first time they mentioned Rebo and Zooty for the first time.
I think you're right.
They do.
Yeah, I think you're right. I'll have to check that. I'll have to double check that for next week. But yeah, honestly, okay, I've kind of said my piece. Fiona, Elysium, your thoughts on the whole situation with the Vorlons and the Shadows and Sheridan and Delenn, or not Sheridan and Kosh.
Well, if it wasn't for Delenn, kind of like, well, give them a victory, in the war room, he probably wouldn't have thought to say, anything about Kosh until he murmurs back at her like, "You're starting to sound like Kosh," and he's like, "Ding, ding, 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 ding." It's like, exactly. Oh.
And to be fair, Sheridan was very diplomatic compared to what he could have been. The Vorlons have been getting the younger races to do all their dirty work without ever doing anything to help. I think the only time we see them actually do anything in anger is when they kill the Death Walker. And that was just to stop people. Oh, you're not ready for this. This is not for you.
Exactly.
So Sheridan had every right to be a little miffed. And the younger races were dying for the Vorlons. So, and then we saw what the Vorlons could do, one-shotting a shadow ship.
Yep. And the fact that the Vorlon ships have shields. Who knew?
Well, I get a sense that, the Vorlons have more of an energy-based shielding while they have organic stuff, but the shadow stuff is more regenerative. Like, they can take more hits because the stuff that helps work the shadow ship helps regenerate it faster because it has a living, like, neural system inside of it, because they have implanted people inside.
at the center of every Vorlant, at the center of every shadow vessel is a warm, chewy center.
Yep. And they prefer those centers to be repurposed telepaths if possible.
Yep.
Although I think that only starts happening the previous year, because I think wasn't it they didn't have telepaths before this in the core, just ordinary people, as Anna Sheridan was a core at one stage.
Oh yeah, because they didn't know who Anna Sheridan was from the next meat puppet to put inside a ship until they figured out like, oh wait, this is somebody important to the guy ruining our day.
Yeah, pretty much. And yes, I know folks are going into spoilers for a show that's 20 years old or over 20 years old. So I don't want to say get over it, but it's 20 years old.
I was still shocked when I found out Darth Vader was Luke Skywalker's father. I'm still in shock.
Honestly, at this point, like nowadays, especially with how entertainment goes, I'd rather be spoiled on something because I'm very peculiar about what I want for my entertainment. I want to have uplifting stuff, gosh darn it.
This is all I gotta say to you, Elysium. Seriously.
Had to be said. Well, it didn't have to be said, but I had to say it anyway.
Oh, you know what? Something we have to should talk about is a little bit of more of Franklin's breakdown. Like he's finally reached the end point with the stems.
Yeah, we should. That's definitely something we should touch on. Absolutely. So, and particularly since I work in a hospital now, this is it's a good cautionary tale. I shouldn't do like uppers or downers, even though I work in a hospital now. Nor that I wouldn't actually do that because, well, it's stupid and it's wrong and it's dangerous. Duh. But yeah, this really is the breaking point for Franklin.
Yeah, because Garibaldi even goes to the point of trying to go behind his back to figure things out, and then at the last minute, he's like, "Nope, he's gonna have to face this on his own." And Franklin realizes, like, yes, I was just afraid to look at it because it would confirm that I am indeed addicted to stims. Mm-hmm. You know, no matter how much he tried to deny it.
And now that he's back in the chat, R. Fisher, Johnny, I most sincerely and humbly apologize for timing you out. I thought you, like I said, I thought you were a troll. We had a troll over on my Twitch stream and everything where I'm streaming this on Twitch. We had a troll there or a spammer, and I thought maybe that up yours was him saying up yours for how dare you block me on Twitch. So I do apologize for timing you out, and R. Fisher, I am glad to see you in the chat, and you know you're always welcome here. So, and yes, to answer your question, up yours was in that conversation between Sheridan and Kosh, along with a few other mild expletives that Sheridan threw his way. But we were talking about Franklin, and well, actually, Garibaldi's the one that's like, dude, you're going off deep end here. You are in serious need of help, like legit. And Franklin's like, dude, get out of my grill. I don't want to hear you. I don't want to hear it. Get out of my face. You've been, every time you walk through my door, you're like, dude, you're on Sims. And he's like, no, I'm not on Sims. Now go away. And he's like, okay, fine. And this is the episode where Franklin finally realizes, crap, I'm on Sims.
Yep. X amount in the bloodstream is okay. X amount over is not okay. And he knew which result it would be.
Exactly. You have always been here, Art Fisher, Johnny. Great to see you in the chat. Yes, it is. So
it's for me. Is it Garibaldi is certainly the person to talk with Franklin, because we see in later seasons Garibaldi's goes just as much off the deep end, if not more, than Franklin.
Oh yeah,
and he really knows what the demons are in that dark hole Franklin's in.
Yep. And it kind of reminds me of a movie that I have only watched a couple of times in my entire life, and I won't ever watch again, and that is Requiem for a Dream. And that is a very difficult, very intense movie that I think I've watched only twice in my entire life since it's been out. And that part of this episode where Franklin is finally hit rock bottom really reminds me in many ways of certain sections of Requiem for a Dream. And it takes him going, yep, I've gone too far. I've put my patients at risk. I've put my own health at risk, and I better resign now before you boot me. Because if he resigns, at least he has the opportunity to come back if he gets himself better. He gets booted, it'd be 10 times harder. Which shows that he still wants to do the work, but he's not doing the work as well as he could. Which does show, for Franklin, a level of responsibility.
Just as I thought it was interesting that they've broken away from Earth, so they're no longer really bound to the rules, but yet they're living by the rules.
Mm-hmm.
And saying, oh, this is illegal, this isn't illegal. And I've been thinking, by what basis? They're a new country, they're a new independent entity.
Mm-hmm.
By their own rules, Franklin could have been okay. They could have said, no, you're fine. But it says to me that they're still living by the Earth Alliance laws, rules, and regulations. That's saying that the Earth Alliance is not bad in itself. It's just a really bad egg, has used what was good and twisted it and corrupted it.
Yes.
And it's a good commentary on the human situation as a whole, what we see in Franklin.
Yes. Well, and the other interesting thing is it also goes back to one other element, and that is the fact that our human nature generally crafts or creates laws and regulations to prevent people from harming themselves. And even though Babylon 5 is no longer part of EarthGov, they still operate by a moral and a ethical code. So, and even without a like big government, quote unquote, they still operate under rules and regulations that are moral and ethical. And morally and ethically it's not right for excuse me. It's not moral ethical for Franklin to abuse drugs and to thereby also abuse himself and harm himself and potentially harm others around him. So that really also speaks very heavily to the human condition that we like to be in an orderly society. And even though Babylon 5 is an independent state, it's that they're not just running around like a bunch of anarchists doing whatever the hell they want and saying, okay, just live whatever way you want to. Franklin's whole situation is a very interesting deep dive into the nature of the human condition and how we order our societies. So, and a quick shout to an old friend, a familiar face I haven't seen in a while, Speaker for the Dead. Good to see you, Speaker. Glad you're here. Yeah, we've been going for a little while now, just breaking down the interludes and intermissions
Yes.
and examinations of Babylon 5. So, always a pleasure to have you in the chat, man. We've missed you. I know have been off for about a week and a half or so now, but still, good to see you, and thank you for popping in. But yeah, that whole situation with Franklin is a really interesting one, and the resolution to his situation in itself is equally interesting. Of course, we'll get to that in due course. So, but mercy, excuse me. Any other major or minor plot points in this episode we want to break down?
Hmm.
Well, it's just for me, it's that it introduces Dr. Hobbs, and she was the one who screamed at him, fought with him, but still backed him up and refused to help Garibaldi sink Franklin. But they'd want to help Garibaldi off the books so that Franklin could get the help he needs. And I
Exactly.
know she was being groomed for the crusade, that she would take over the Franklin's role on Babylon 5 for that series. She would
Hmm.
become more prominent. Unfortunately, that never happened.
Yeah. And I got our Fisher Johnny's comment up here. Even if one is independent, one still tends to follow old laws and habits, even if it's just out of inertia. Yeah. Art Fisher, I think that's a very good point, and I'll also bring up Speaker's comment here. I think it's interesting that Franklin suffers the same problem that the original Doctor in the first episode did. Yeah, if I remember correctly, well, now that was somewhat different because Kyle was taking them just so he could keep up with Kosh's condition. I don't know if it was necessarily follow through per se. It could have been. I mean, this could have been laying the groundwork for something that was going to be wrong with Franklin down the road. We don't know per se, but yeah, that is an interesting point, speaker. So thank you for pointing that out. So,
Just to go back to the previous comment,
mm-hmm,
in Ireland after the War of Independence,
mm-hmm,
what we said we got our independence from Britain, we'd fought a war, it lasted on and off 800 years, and then we said all that happened was they painted the postbox green. Everything else stayed the same. The laws remained the same. The basically the civil servants just moved from British civil servants in Ireland to working for the Irish Free State. So nothing changed. The law is pretty much as is. So
yeah.
he's absolutely correct.
Well, I think, well, no, there is one, I would say, kind of polar opposite to that, and that is, of course, the American War for Independence. Because we set up our own government, although some things are based loosely on British common law and so on, and the legal code and what have you. But a lot of the other things, we obviously have our Bill of Rights and so on. We have our Constitution and what have you. So, but I don't want to get into a whole American history lesson here. That's not what this episode. This is not what this is about. But it kind of goes that way, unfortunately. Sometimes, not unfortunately, but sometimes it does go that way. But you know, it really does show you that in a series like Babylon 5, and it shows you how far people can be stretched, and they will figure out a way to keep on going. Because with Babylon 5 being an independent state, they still function. It still runs. It still works. Although they are under a tremendous amount of stress considering everything that's going on, particularly with the war, with the shadows, and so on, and with the upcoming war against Clark, it's kind of put on the back burner until season 4. So, there is one other thing I do want to touch on before we start to wrap up, and that is, of course, Kosh's death and the whole exchange between him and Sheridan's mind, and in the aftermath. I will say they did a very good job of making you feel sadness for a mechanized suit that had a voice speaking from out of it. And honestly, I will say that I think Kosh's death was rather touching. I mean, for me, it is almost like I put it up there, even though technically he doesn't die, quote unquote. I put it up there with Yoda's death in Return of the Jedi. And just real quick to the chat, LDG Geeks Geeks Enjoy, thank you. I appreciate it. We just hit 420 just yesterday, so and I appreciate everybody that's subscribed. We're 80 away from 500, so hey, we're chugging along little by little, bit by bit. But I just to kind of wrap up my comment, then you guys can say your piece. I found that scene particularly touching because they made you feel something. They made you feel sorrow or empathy for Kosh. And of course, Delenn says her piece at the end. Then you are to allow the ship to leave because it was made for Kosh. In a way, it will mourn Kosh's passing just as much as we do. And because it has been set up through several little scenes that the ship is alive. And it will perform its last duty and fly into the sun.
I think some of that might be something similar to the Heinleins, or they call Neo-Dogs in Starship Troopers. They're creatures they're dogs that have been uplifted slightly, but they're so tied to their masters that they can't survive without.
Mm-hmm.
So the ship, in some ways, possibly the same way, the ship couldn't survive without him.
Yeah.
That its loss, its grieving is so great that they feel this euthanasia is kinder, which is terrifying in a way.
Yes. But at the same time, it's fitting.
And then, of course, you have the shadow ships where it's like, let's just plug anybody in. Woo!
Yeah. Well, and, you know, I remember the first time I watched that episode way back when. And Kosh was my favorite character, still is to this day. And I actually shed a few tears. And then when I rewatched it, I had a fresh insight into it. Everything that happens after Kosh's death is a memorial to him, even though he would never want one. Considering Kosh's state of mind, if we could even fathom Kosh's state of mind, although we can in part, obviously, because as I said earlier, he does emote. But him doing what he does starts to break the cycle, starts to break the wheel of perpetual war. For him, when the Vorlons and the Shadows go beyond the rim, when Lorien takes his leave, I think, even though at that point Kosh is out of Sheridan's body, perhaps somewhere out there in the vastness of space, the consciousness known as Kosh perhaps smiles and says, "My student, perhaps even my equal, Sheridan did it. He broke the cycle we were all trapped in." And that's Kosh's testament. Because he was the one Vorlon out of the entire race that saw the spark of potential that existed in humanity. He didn't see us as tools to be manipulated, but he saw in us the potential to become something more. And by breaking the wheel the way Sheridan did, humanity's potential, several million years in the future, would finally be reached, and we would elevate or evolve to the same state that the Vorlons were. Sorry, I don't generally soliloquy.
Yeah, it's fine. Because obviously Kosh is one of your favorites. So there you go. Everybody has a favorite character. I just haven't really chosen which one is my ultimate favorite character just yet.
It's hard to choose because there's so many great characters that I think, depending on the day, I go from Marcus to Garibaldi to Londo, Jakar, Ivanova, Sheridan. You know, any day could be one of many. They're all fantastic, and it's like most of those characters come from JMS, so it's like ourselves. We all have own aspects of our personalities that each character speaks to on a different day.
Yeah, and they say that any writer puts a piece of themselves into every character that they create. I think that's true of JMS. There's a bit of him in every character. There's a little JMS in Sheridan. There's a little bit of him in Sinclair, in Ivanova, in Franklin, in Garibaldi, in Jakar, in Londo, in Veer, in Kosh, in Lead Alexander, in Captain, what's her name? Lockley. In every major character, and even in Marcus, there's a little piece of JMS. And when you put all those characters together, you get maybe just a brief snapshot of the complex person that J. Michael Straczynski is. And that, to me, is a glorious thing. And I'll bring up Art Fisher's comment here. I guess I'm most like Veer Koto. Eh? And that, I would say, Art Fisher is a good place to be. Because sometimes you're very brave, sometimes you're a little skittish, but all in all, you have a good heart and a good mind, and that is what brings Veer through to his end. And his end is a very good one. So, sorry, I've been waxing philosophical this evening. My apologies if anyone's been bored. I guess I've dismissed this.
I'm fine. I'm fine. Today is just one of those days where it's like, had to get stuff done. But we had a good episode to break down, so that's always good.
Yes.
But most days, I feel like Corwin. It's like everything, like, what's happening? Oh, okay.
Well, like I said, next week will be a fun one because we're going to be breaking down War Without End Parts 1 and 2. So that'll be a fun ride. Because
the closed circle of fun time travel. Zathras.
That doesn't come up until, I think, a few episodes. I'll bring up Johnny's comment here. These are philosophical conversations are interesting. Well, leave it to a seminarian to go wax philosophical. Anyway. Well, guys, any final comments before we do close out?
I think we pretty much covered, well, for my part, pretty much covered everything.
Yeah, most of the stuff that I can think of.
Okay. All right. Well, Elysium, Fiona, good to be back. Good to have you back, and good to be back amongst friends, back amongst the council. And as always, folks, if you catch us on the replay, make sure you leave your comments below with anything we discussed this evening. And again, if you are new to the channel, if this is your first time here and you liked what we did today, consider hitting that subscribe button. And I promise you it will be worth your time. I do want to let you all know that Elysium has included the links to everyone on the council in the chat. So if you are not subscribed to Fiona or Elysium or Zod Rider or Lord Koj or Classic Comics, go check out their channels. They are absolutely positively worth your time. If they weren't, I wouldn't have them here. But I do want to let you all know I will be back again tomorrow evening, 7 p.m. Central Time. Gonna be doing kind of a review blowout, or as I call it, a geekasm. Because when there's so much pop culture to talk about, you literally have a geekasm. And we'll be breaking down the first 3 episodes of The Bad Batch. We'll be talking about the recent the brand new trailer for Venom, Let There Be Carnage, and we'll be doing a retro review of a favorite movie of mine, and that is, of course, Men in Black. So if you either want to be on the panel, because I am putting that panel together, or you just want to tune in, make sure you hit that reminder, because I have set that stream up for tomorrow evening. Set your reminders and tune in for all the fun. And of course, we'll be back next week at our brand new time, 5:30 Central Time on Fridays, and we'll be continuing our review of Babylon 5. So, but that all being said, you all have a great evening and a great weekend. I will see you all tomorrow night. And this is the Council of One saying, and this time say it with me, guys. Zooty, zooty,
Zoot, zoot,
zoot, zoot.
Yes. We tried.